Hello and welcome to the College Football Players Association podcast. My name is Jason Stahl. I am the founder and executive director of the College Football Players Association. Our guest today is Dr. Scott Lynch. Dr. Lynch is an orthopedic surgeon. He is the former director of athletic medicine and orthopedic consultant to the Penn State University football team. And we'll talk about why former here later on in our podcast. But first, I want to welcome you to the podcast, Dr. Lynch.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good. All right, let's start at the beginning. I should also mention to our viewers that you are a new advisor to the College Football Players Association. We are currently in the midst of sort of 3-month-long highlighting of health, safety, and welfare issues for college football players, both current and former. And we were bringing on a whole new set of advisors, including you, Dr. Lynch, to really focus on what we think are sort of the unresolved problems in the area of health, safety, and welfare as it pertains to college football players. You, of course, are uniquely situated to talk about these things. We'll get to that. Before we get to that, I want to start at the very beginning, because usually what we talk to we start this, we talk with football players mostly on this podcast, and we start and we say, okay, tell us about your football career. All right, well, you don't have a football career, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but you do have an extensive wrestling career. So you were a quote unquote student athlete. Can you let's start there, because I think that's a good segue into why you got into your field and so on. Can you just kind of talk us through your career as a very renowned high school and collegiate wrestler, correct?
I don't know about renowned, but
I'll say it. I said it.
Yeah. People ask me, when did you start to wrestle? And I always say, I don't know. My dad was a wrestling coach. He wrestled at Lock Haven with a guy named Gray Simons, who was sort of the Cale Sanderson of that era. So, I grew up wrestling, would go with my dad to the practices and things. And wrestling is really a big reason I got into medicine. My degree's in electrical engineering. I then stayed on as a grad assistant at Penn State, where I did my undergrad as well, and got a master's in electrical engineering. I got hurt frequently. In fact, had an ACL injury my senior year of college, got back 2 weeks before the end of the season, and was able to get back to wrestling, and fortunate enough to win the nationals. Also moved up a weight, so that was controversial with my coaches at the time. So I have a passion for helping athletes to reach their goals, because physicians helped me. But the difference for me, as we're going to talk about later, is it was my decision. It wasn't the coaches pressuring me into making a decision to help them. Life's about risk-benefit ratio, which is what I talk to my patients about all the time. And it's the patient to decide and to get outside influences out of that decision. It's part of my goal.
So did you feel, okay, so that's why I said renowned, national championship at Penn State, right? That's renowned as far as I'm concerned. It's a lot farther than I got in my wrestling career. So, so let's talk about this injuries. You and I haven't discussed that significantly in your senior year, and walk us through that a bit if you're comfortable, just in terms of like how did your injuries as a college athlete sort of inform your segue into what would become your career as an orthopedic surgeon?
Well, again, it was, I had goals as an athlete and as a student. And of course, everyone who wrestles, their goal is to win nationals, so win the Olympics or reach the pinnacle of your sport. I'm not adverse to people taking risks. I rode a bull for my 50th birthday. So, most people think that would be kind of stupid. Jump out of airplanes. but because it's their risk benefit ratio. So that was my decision at the time, was for me to reach my goal. I was willing to risk wrestling with an injury and potentially making it worse. But it was my decision, not the decision of the coach, so he can finish 7-5 and keep his job.
So do you feel like then the doctors, whoever it was, the trainers, whatever the sort of care team was at the time, do you feel like then, how should it go? How did it go then? Because you feel, what you're articulating here to me is it was your decision. Did you feel then like, okay, you were fully informed and then arrived at this yourself? I mean, walk me through like using your own experience, but then also your experience, obviously, in your career. How should it go? How should it go when a college athlete is dealing with, an injury that needs to be evaluated and treated properly? How should it go?
Yeah, I mean, not just college; it's all athletes, right?
Yep.
So in high school, my junior in high school, I got an infected prepatellar bursa on my knee. Had to be hospitalized. This was at the end of the year during the end of the year tournaments. So it's in Pennsylvania, it's the regional tournament, which is the week before the state tournament. I was in the hospital for 2 days, got released Friday morning, wrestled Friday evening in the regional tournament with gauze hanging out the front of my knee. But again, it's my decision because that's an important thing for me, is to try to win states. It would have been a more ridiculous decision to do that in the beginning of the year for the coach to win a match, right? So the thing should be, you see the physician, you have a discussion with the physician, and then you go over the risks and benefits of participating and not participating, which are going to be different for every individual. And that individual then, they can seek input from others. But what shouldn't happen is for the coach to go either to the kid or the medical team and try to influence that decision for his or her own benefit. And that's happens a lot. And that has to stop. And the more money gets involved, the more it changes that decision process. So, if a coach is making $10 million a year, which is roughly what Franklin makes now, for him to come just so he can save his $10 million a year job and put the kid at risk, that's not appropriate.
Okay, so we're going to get to that for viewers who are new to this issue. You were, again, the director of athletic medicine and orthopedic consultant to the Penn State University football team in the past under head coach James Franklin. We're going to get to that situation there, and this is a big reason why we're on the podcast together and why you're an advisor to the College Football Players Association. Before we get to that kind of recent past, let's go further back and talk about your career leading up to that. Okay, so you come out of college athletics, undergrad degree, you said in engineering, right? But here you are, you're an orthopedic surgeon. Talk to me about that transition. That I think is probably a unique transition for a person to make, from engineering to orthopedic surgeon. So just talk us through that transition, why you did it, what did it look like for you, and then take us into the early part of your career.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was a lot to do with me getting injured and physicians helping me. I wanted to give back to society, I guess, and to help others to reach their goals. I also had a friend who was getting out of podiatry school at the time, starting his practice, and I was interested in that. So I hung out with him a little bit to see what he was doing. Operating on people is fun. It's a cool job. It wasn't that I was unhappy in engineering. I was designing microwave communication amplifiers, essentially for satellite communication.
Wow.
But it's not a lot of people interaction. It's not a lot of direct helping of people. And that was appealing to me. I had to go back and pick up biology and organic chemistry, where I went to the University of Virginia to do that. Coached there for a year. Then went to medical school at Pitt, Penn State's huge rival at that time, and helped coach wrestling while I was in med school there as well. We had a 2-time national champ who's now a coach at Lehigh.
Wow.
So helping people to reach those goals, not just in medicine, but as a coach, is really rewarding.
That's cool. Okay, good. Our previous conversation, your early career, you said you started in 1998, and then talk us. When did you arrive at Penn State? Let's do it that way. When did you arrive at Penn State then as a doctor?
So that was 1998. I got to Penn State College of Medicine, which is in Hershey.
Okay.
I spent a year in Sweden prior to that, doing an extra sports medicine fellowship. So I guess the backup is I did my residency in orthopedics at the University of Vermont, which is a 5-year program. Then I did a sports medicine fellowship, which is an elective thing to subspecialize. I did that at the Cleveland Clinic, and then did that extra fellowship in Sweden, and then started at Penn State. So I've been here since 1998. Here, I'm in Hershey now. I still work at Penn State Health and Penn State College of Medicine.
Okay. Hershey, Penn State Health, since 98. Okay. When did you then move more into a direct role with the Penn State University football team? When did you move into that position of Director of Athletic Medicine, orthopedic consultant to the Penn State football team? When was that?
So I always get mixed up on the years, but I think it was 2013.
Okay.
Originally, for a year, I was just an orthopedic consultant for football. That was under Coach Bill O'Brien. And then about a year later or so, I was named as the Director of Athletic Medicine, which meant I was in charge of all the other docs up there who took care of the teams.
Got it. Okay, teams. That was one thing I was going to ask you. You said teams. So is that beyond the football team as well?
Yes. So I might get the numbers wrong, but there's about 33 sports. That includes cheer and rugby. There's about 33 sports that I would have been in charge of.
Got it. Okay. And did you handle most surgeries then for college athletes at Penn State who needed surgeries, or was it a team of people, or how's it look exactly?
So I would only be directly in charge of the surgeries on the football team. The other orthopedic surgeons up there who are assigned to each team would be directly in charge of the surgeries on the other teams.
Interesting. Okay. So basically then, when was your, if you can remember, when was your first surgery on a football player then?
Oh, probably a week after it started.
Okay. Yeah. So around that 2013 time.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So we've got good. I wanted to establish this timeline in part because I think people will come into your story and understand maybe, let's just say whatever it is, the more recent past. I think it's good to kind of set for people. It's a very long history you had at Penn State, which I think a lot of people don't understand. First, as a college athlete, I remember when I encountered your story for the first time, I found it compelling in part because you were a college athlete. And as you said, like you were not averse to risk. You just talked through your different injuries and how you had to evaluate personally the risk for you and for your family or whatever it was.
Well,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's even more than that. I mean, Penn State changed my life. I started out the Naval Academy. I hated it. It just wasn't for me. I always tell people, you might be surprised to find out I don't like people telling me what to do.
That's both of us. This is both of us.
They always laugh, of course. And I was just looking for anywhere to get out of there almost. A former teammate of mine in high school was at Penn State. And there were some, trying to be kind here, but when I was in high school, there were some really bad actors on the wrestling team. One guy had committed arson. So they replaced the coach, and that coach cleaned house, got rid of all the bad actors that were on the wrestling team, and started new. His first year, I think he won one match, and then that was Coach Lorenzo who took over. So I wasn't interested in going to Penn State until that happened. And former teammate in high school sort of recruited me to come there. So it changed my life. People would always say, I bleed blue more than anybody. So the one thing that comes up about my trial is, I thought you loved Penn State. That's true. And that's why I'm doing this. It might seem a little bit of a oxymoron, but I'm doing this to help Penn State. They need to start to do the right thing, which in my view, maybe I was delusional, but I thought we did do the right thing back then.
Okay. Very well said. I want to kind of put a pin in that and return to it, though, later. Because for viewers who are not aware of your case, let's now bring things obviously to the present here and talk about this court case. To do so, I'm not a Penn State football fan. I did not even. I make fun of myself. I didn't even follow college football before 2014. Now I know everything about college football, but back in 2014, I knew nothing about college football. And so when you then you take this position in 2013. You're an orthopedic surgeon for the football team. Who's the coach of Penn State when you come into that position?
My first year was Bill O'Brien.
Okay. And then walk me through then the coaching changes that occur, because James Franklin's been there quite a long time now, but I actually don't know how long. So what did the coaching changes look like as you were in that position?
So Bill O'Brien was there for 2 years.
Okay.
He got installed after the Sandusky affair.
Yep.
I shouldn't say installed, but got hired.
Yeah.
I can't tell you who, because I wasn't involved in this, but they weren't happy with some of the medical issues. It wasn't really medical care issues. It was other things, to my understanding, that came out at the trial. I don't really want to get into that, but so they made a change, and I became the orthopedic consultant.
Got it.
That was for a year with Bill O'Brien, who was actually phenomenal. Great person, never interfered.
Wow.
Then James Franklin took over roughly a year after I started.
Okay.
Around the same time that I got named as the director of athletic medicine in charge of all the sports.
Got it. Okay. All right. So
let's talk. So 2014.
Okay. So roughly then, I didn't realize that as many times as we talked now. So you basically take over this position at almost the exact same time then that he comes in. You have this sort of mini experience with Bill O'Brien that's very positive, but then James Franklin comes in, and let's kind of set the stage for people here. 2014, 2015, 2016, these years. You said Bill O'Brien, great, this is a model for a coach, didn't interfere with your medical decision making, left it up to you and your patient. right? This is what we would want from head coaches. We know there are good coaches that are out there that do that sort of thing. You know, you said Bill O'Brien's one of those coaches. Okay, well, obviously you do not think. Go ahead.
Let me just interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
You use the term "you." It's not just me making the decisions, right? We have a medical team.
Good.
So that's the athletic trainers and the other docs. The one who was with me was Pete Seidenberg, was a primary care doc. So we work together as a team. So it's a sports medicine team, not just me.
Excellent.
Make those decisions.
Thank you for the correction. Yes, because this
me if I'm the surgeon making the decision, of course, but it's a consultation with the group.
Great. Thank you for the correction. I'm a layperson. I was not a college athlete. I was not any sort of high level athlete. And so, yeah, for someone like me and the viewers out there like me, correct me anytime, because I want the viewer to understand how it should be. Right. And so, okay, you have the care team, you're evaluating your patient. Bill O'Brien's the coach, you're not getting interference, right? You feel like, yeah, this is how the whole thing is supposed to work. I'm doing my due diligence as a doctor and doing best by my patient and so on. Okay. So James Franklin comes in and we have described to me the culture change then. Take us through that transition period. Like, when did you begin to really believe, wow, this is very different? And I'm now experiencing something that is, we've talked about many times, that is the opposite of what you were experiencing under Coach O'Brien. So speak to the layperson here, the non-expert, right? What changed? What changed with that coaching change? How did the culture change?
Well, they're very different individuals. Coach Franklin is a micromanager and wants to control every little detail, including things he shouldn't try to control. I think I'll just kind of leave it at that.
How did that affect your job, though?
Yeah, it made it more difficult because he was trying to interfere in medical decisions.
In what way? I mean, obviously, I've read a lot of news reports from your trial. We're going to get to the trial here in a second, and so a lot of this is public. Just speak what's public, like what came out at trial.
Well, I think the first issue was the spatting issue with Nike. Nike came in and actually had a rep come into the training room and talk to us to tell us you're not allowed to spat.
Describe to the lay person. What does that mean?
Spatting is taping over top of the shoe. So they did have a cover they could put over the tape, but they didn't want to do that either because they said that taping on the shoe makes it look like the shoe doesn't work well. So they were concerned about the marketing issue with taping on top of the shoe. Franklin cared because Penn State has a contract with Nike, and in that contract, you can go back and look at the trial to see this actual contract. It stipulates that we're not allowed to spat, and if you spat, they'll take the money away. It says unauthorized spatting, but clearly in the contract, the unauthorized refers to Nike being able to tell the medical staff who can get spatted and who can't. And we disagreed with that, of course. There is some controversy about whether spatting helps or not, but that's not up to Nike. It's up to the physician, the medical staff, and the patients to decide that.
Okay. So with this culture change from one coach to one coach, is it fair to say then that what you're experiencing with the new coach, Coach Franklin, is micromanager interfering with medical decisions, wanting to be much more heavy-handed than Coach O'Brien was, wanting to be involved in even things like the spatting of the ankles and injury treatment and so on? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So, all right, let's then bring it to you were pushed out of this position. Is that a good way to frame it?
I would say
How would you
removed.
frame it? Removed. Okay. When were you removed from
I
your
didn't
position?
voluntarily get pushed. Pushed sort of means they encouraged me to leave. They removed me.
Okay. So you were removed from this position. What year was that?
2019.
Okay. So you're effectively in this position with James Franklin as head coach 4 to 5 years, correct?
About 5 years.
About 5 years. So for 5 years, I've read a lot of news about your trial. We'll get to the trial here in one sec. I just want to set the stage for the viewer here. For 5 years, did you feel like this was a sort of constant, ongoing battle with this coach over injury treatment for the players?
Definitely.
Okay. So you're removed from this position, and
Let me just add one
please.
thing. I told my supervisors, Dr. Black, and I told the athletic integrity officer continually about that pressure.
Okay. All right. So I'm glad you said this. All right. So your supervisor is Dr. Black. You're reporting to him. You're saying, I'm feeling this pressure from the head coach. This is very different than the previous coach who left medical care to the medical team. Right.
Yep.
And this athletic integrity officer, let's talk about this. I've read a lot about this. The athletic integrity officer was established after the Jerry Sandusky scandal, right? I think this is what, going back to your point about, don't you love Penn State? I think the way people look at institutions very often are in this narrow sort of defensive way, which is you always defend the institution, as opposed to, if the institution is doing wrong, you want to remove that wrongdoing to make the institution better. That's how you and I look at it, right?
Yep.
But
Exactly.
very, very often in the dominant culture, we have the opposite view, which is you love the institution, and so you will defend it no matter what. And so you still have people to this day, I've heard in the Penn State fan community, who will suggest that nothing was done wrong regarding Jerry Sandusky. You have this decades, as an outsider, I've read all about, decades long, sexual assault scandal, that plagued this campus and plagued this football team. And so many people knew, and nothing was done about it. And eventually, finally, when we have some marginal measure of justice here, this integrity officer was established, correct?
Correct. That came out of the Sandusky issue.
Yes. And so the integrity officer, my understanding is there for people to report to. It's a good idea in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Is there for people to report to, and then that person then takes things outside of the institution, because we've sort of marked this institution as, there's some problems here. And so if there are future problems, maybe issues with the institution need to be reported to this person and then taken to the NCAA or taken to the Big Ten, like taken to a higher authority. Am I right about that?
That's how it's supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to work. Right. Okay. So that's how it's supposed to work. But of course,
now,
in your case,
I would add,
please.
That the people you're reporting to also have to care.
Yes.
The Big Ten and the NCAA have to care enough to want to act. And as they've shown in my case, they don't want any part of it.
Okay. So if we have multiple institutions, you can have this athletic integrity officer, but if multiple institutions don't care to do anything with the information that's brought to the officer, what does it matter? That is, if there's no enforcement of anything, what does it matter? Right. So go ahead, please.
It became even worse. So in the beginning, the athletic integrity officer had to report to the Big Ten and the NCAA. Once the consent decree ended, that didn't have to happen anymore. Oh. And the integrity officer reported to the president and the board. He would also discuss with the athletic director. So it became now a position where the university used it in the exact opposite of what its intention was. So they would go, and I know this because Bob Bolin, the integrity officer, told me this. They would, if some issue would come to him, he would investigate and then go to the university, one of those people he's interacting with, and say, here's my recommendations. And they would completely ignore his recommendations. And then if something came up, they could say, oh, the integrity officer investigated that. And just leave it at that and bury it. And
okay, so we have a multifold problem here. On the one hand, it's not being taken to a higher authority after a certain period of time. Even if it was, would the Big Ten and or the NCAA have done anything? Probably not. And then when it's all kept in-house, it's just like the Sandusky thing. Bury it, bury it, bury it, bury it.
Yep. So in my case, Bob did the investigation. And then, according to his testimony, I won't say anything more, but according to his testimony, he then immediately went to the counsel for Penn State so that he could keep it under attorney-client privilege and not have to reveal it to me.
Got it. Okay.
So that's exactly the situation I'm talking about. He did the investigation, but keeps it under wraps so they can hide everything.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. So this is good. We need to get into this level of specificity because we need to understand why these problems exist, not just at Penn State, but, throughout college football, many other places, right? Because the institutions are the ones that have to do something, but the institutions are more inclined to, the cover up is often worse than the crime. We hear this, right? And this is a classic case of the cover up being worse than the crime, correct?
Correct.
And go ahead.
The other thing that happens is while I was in the position, I had the ability to fight it. Once they removed me, now I'm out of the loop. I don't have a way to protect my patients.
Okay.
So then my only solution was to file a suit.
Okay. Okay.
So my boss said to me, I thought you had it under control. It's like, well, I did while I was in there. Now you removed me. Now I have no way to control it. So if the person replacing me doesn't capitulate to the coach, he's also going to be removed.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So you're removed from the position and you bring a lawsuit. You do not lose your job entirely. You still are an orthopedic surgeon, but you lose this position as director of athletic medicine and orthopedic consultant to the football team. Okay. And you're not doing the surgeries on football players anymore. All right. And so you then immediately believe, and I think we've outlined here why this is directly tied to your advocacy for doing your job how it should be done, which is providing that independent medical care free from pressure from a coach or a head coach or whatever it looks like. And so you then decide this is worth fighting in the courts. Yep. And you bring a lawsuit. And so when does your attorney
bring losing my job, of course.
Of course. So I think that's what people need to understand. And a lot of people don't, because I didn't at the beginning, which is you continue to be an orthopedic surgeon for Penn State Health. And so you then bring a lawsuit against your employer, correct?
Yeah. And the jury actually laughed when this came out.
I bet they did.
During me suing my employer, they put me on the ethics committee.
I mean, you really can't make that up. I remember the first time you told me, and I was like, how is that possible? Okay, so you are thought of highly enough to be on an ethics committee, but they've removed you from this position because you've been too ethical, right? I mean, you can't make this up, right? And so when is that lawsuit brought?
Yeah, I don't like throwing those kind of words around.
I did it.
Do the best they can do.
I did it.
I'm not going to say, I get uncomfortable when you try to say, well, you're more ethical than somebody else. So,
well, you're trying to do your job how it should and needs to be done. And you were removed from your job because you were doing that and because you were forcefully advocating for your patients, the football players at Penn State. And
yes.
you should be commended for that. And it was worth bringing a lawsuit.
Yep.
What year
My
did you
job.
bring the lawsuit?
I'm sorry?
Which year? What year did you bring the lawsuit?
Well, it was in the works. We filed, as you're aware, it was within 180 days of the actual day I was removed, but the courts ruled for the one part that was thrown out that the clock started the day I was told I was going to be removed. So that's the whistleblower part. That's why it got thrown out, was they said I didn't file within that 180-day window. So
okay, let's explain to the viewers here what you mean by this. So you get removed from the position
March 1st.
March 1st of 2019, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so then you go to an attorney and you writing this lawsuit and so on. Well, there's statute of limitations on certain things, and you want to bring a lawsuit against your employer, your direct report supervisor, Dr. Black, but you also want to bring a whistleblower lawsuit against personally James Franklin and the athletic director, Sandy Barber. Is that correct?
And Penn State Athletics, Sharmell Green, who was the assistant AD.
Okay. And so, all right. So immediately, though, there begins this argument, which you're referencing here, over a statute of limitations, which is still ongoing. I know your attorney is appealing part of this, but essentially the court said, okay, you can keep the lawsuit against Penn State Health and Dr. Black, but we're going to remove the whistleblower part of this against James Franklin, athletic director Sandy Barber, Penn State, athletics, because you have missed the statute of limitations for filing by 2 days. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2 or 3 days. I don't remember exact.
Okay. Now, your attorney, who I've spoken to, is obviously still not happy about this and is appealing this, and he has a very different interpretation. And we'll see how this plays out in the courts. But I think the viewers should understand it was a much wider lawsuit than that. Was narrowed down to essentially Penn State Health, your employer, and Dr. Black. Okay,
right, and that part was an adverse job consequence for.
Got it. Okay,
for me complying with the Pennsylvania Medical Practices Act, which requires me to do what's right for my patients.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Good. I'm a historian. I like that we're walking through history here very methodically for people who don't understand how we got to the case. I want to insert a little personal narrative right now here, because now then I encounter your case for the first time in 2022. So I founded the College Football Players Association in July 2021. In spring of 2022, I'm connected with Sean Clifford, who then was the quarterback in the Penn State football team. And, Sean and I talk with some other players, and, he decides that he wants to invite me out to Penn State to try to organize the players into the first College Football Players Association chapter. Okay. And at this point, because I don't really know a lot about Penn State football and James Franklin, I hire a researcher to basically tell me everything I need to know. Go and do research on this man, and this team, and give me a sort of dossier of everything I need to understand before I go. Okay. And your case is a big part of this. Of course, his past at Vanderbilt football and sexual assault allegations there. And, it's a lot of sordid history. But your case, I particularly pay attention to, because in effect, what you were saying at the time, and this had not gone to trial yet, but here's this doctor who's a former Penn State athlete. So we know he's not averse to risk if he's a wrestler in the early 80s.
Let me just add that my attorney is also a former Penn State national champion gymnast.
Okay. So we've got two people who have taken up this case against their own institution, right? So that's a big, and they're also both athletes. So right there for me, I don't say I trust you, even though I don't know you, but I'm sort of trusting what you're saying at this point, merely because of those two things. Okay. And so part of what I want to do then when I go out and I talk with players in person at Penn State in July of 2022, as we try to organize this chapter, is this true? And is the doctor that is here now and the medical team that is here now treating players well or not? Or are some of the same problems that you're describing from 2014 to 2019 still there and or are getting worse because of the medical team and you're no longer there? Now, I haven't talked about this a whole lot publicly, but what I find, I've spoken with that whole team at this point, and I've had intimate conversations with, I would say, 20 players. And I immediately knew after those conversations that everything you were saying was true, and that things got worse after you left. Because that's what players were describing to me when they could candidly speak about their medical situation with coaches not around and administrators not around. So I want to sort of personally testify to the ultimate outcome in your case, which we're going to get to now, but to these allegations that you've made, the enormous amount of evidence that I have from talking with players in person suggests that everything you're saying here is absolutely true.
Yeah, of course, I have no way to know what happened after I left. Other than, some anecdotal things from former players who talked to me.
Sure.
But it makes sense because that physician's going to be under pressure. He knows what's going to happen now. If he doesn't comply, he's getting removed also.
There you go. Right. And so if the guy who takes your job then understands, oh, wait, this is what happens if you don't play ball, then he's going to play ball if he doesn't want to lose his job.
Correct.
Okay, so
and the athletic trainers are actually under even more pressure than the physician.
Why? Okay, illuminate for the lay person. Why is that true?
Well, they're there every day and interacting with the coach every day, so there's more hands-on opportunity for the coach to try to put pressure on the athletic trainers. I mean, that's probably the main reason, and that they tend to actually have more control over hiring and firing of the athletic trainers as well.
Okay. Your case goes to trial. Then you get in front of a jury. Let's make sure people understand that. When does it go in front of the jury? When do you start selecting the jury pool? Do you know? Can you put a timeline on that for us?
Well, it was 5 years after, about 5.5 years after I filed the suit.
Okay. So was that this year then?
The verdict was on my birthday. Actually.
Hey, happy birthday. There you go.
May 29th.
Okay. So the verdict comes in your favor. We'll get to that in a second. May 29th of this calendar year. I think what's important here to situate for people is that the jury pool is drawn from prospective jurors in Pennsylvania, who you and I both know are going to be Penn State University football fans, correct? And many of them were.
Well, the question was asked of all the prospective jurors, how many of you are Penn State fans? Nearly everybody in the room raised their hand.
Okay. So you are up and your attorney are up against a prospective jury pool that is probably going to be disinclined to rule in your favor if they're thinking in this sort of, I guess, insane fan mind, if they're there, right? If it's just like win, win, win at all cost, they're not going to be inclined to rule in your favor, right? Is that fair to say?
This is Dauphin County also, which is not Philadelphia County. So for them to give multi-million-dollar awards is not common in this area.
Okay.
Philadelphia, that's very common. This is more, there's a lot more rural community out here. So, $5 million around here is extraordinary amount of money to most people.
Okay. All right. Very good. So you have a pool of people, rural Penn State University football fans. This goes to trial. They ultimately rule in your favor and issue $5 million of punitive damages in your favor, which you describe for the layperson, if you can. I know you're not an attorney, but what do we mean when we say punitive damages? What is that?
So punitive is for egregious behavior. Again, that's not very common for the courts to allow it to be given out. Not very common for it to be awarded really anywhere. In this area, it's very uncommon. For them, that part is to punish the people who did the behavior so they won't do it again. So the total award is, I got $250,000 for my financial losses, and then there was $5 million on top of that for the punitive damage for the egregious behavior.
Okay. All right. So to bring us all the way to the present, then, the case now is being appealed by Penn State Health, the jury's verdict, and so now we're into the next appellate court. But of course, your attorney is also appealing the statute of limitations whistleblower decision, and essentially saying Penn State Athletics, James Franklin as the head coach and as Sandy Barber as the athletic director, he wants to be brought back in to the case and effectively challenge that 2-day statute of limitations argument. Am I describing that correct?
For the court part of it, yes. So I do want to add that this never really was about the money for me. This is about protecting the student athletes. Then the only way I was left to try to do that was by filing this lawsuit, because the only thing they really pay attention to now is money. So when they get hurt financially, then they will decide to hopefully do something. It's been disappointing since my case that the NCAA and Big Ten have not even paid attention. They've never tried to contact me or any other medical staff during this whole period. And for an organization that pretends to care about the health and safety of the student athletes, you would think they would want to at least have a conversation.
Doesn't this illuminate something, though, about college football? Doesn't this, like the fact that I've told so many people about your case who are very well versed in the world of college football, right? Who are either fans or they follow it, or the business side of college football, or whatever the case may be. I bet you 9 out of 10 people don't know your case when I bring it up. And given that we were subjected last year to this, the NCAA and the Big Ten, when we had the idea that, Jim Harbaugh's Michigan team might be stealing signs, we were subject to a months-long drama over, and the NCAA and the Big Ten, boy, they were on it when it was about sign stealing, which every player I've ever talked to tells me every team does. Mm-hmm. And so it was just like this sort of, well, is the sign stealing uniquely bad? And here you are with a jury verdict against a sitting head coach with very damning charges here, and you haven't heard a peep from the NCAA and the Big Ten. And to the extent that it gets talked about in the media, some media do take it seriously. Penn Live, there's been some ESPN reporting that's taken it seriously. We think that, maybe more is coming. But then the sort of insider college football people, it's like, to the extent that they mention it, it's like, oh, does this hurt James Franklin in recruiting? It's this bizarre. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I want to raise awareness, and that's been difficult. I think the reason is, and this is my own opinion, but I think the reason is that athletics is fans' way of escaping reality. So they don't want anything to disrupt that thing that's enjoyable by having to think about how the coaches are harming the kids. I don't think for most people they don't care. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine about this not too long ago. And he kind of said, he said, well, I don't care about all that because it's his way of, not having to think about his job and just getting away from reality. So they don't want anything disrupting that. I'm at a loss for exactly how to describe it, but that way to escape and have, a couple hours of their life where they don't have to think about these types of things.
That's an interesting theory. I will admit I've never thought of it in that way. I think I do struggle with the fans sometimes because you and I have similar situations, right? Of whistleblowing, particular institution, dealing with fan response. And that's an interesting theory.
And this friend of mine, he's a good person. He wants to do the right thing. And he, asked me medical advice about his kids all the time. So, yeah, he's not a bad person. It's it's that clouded view of a fan. They just want Penn State to win, and they don't want to have to think about how it happens.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is not the right thing because they don't understand how many people they're getting hurt by doing that.
Getting hurt and then suffering for the rest of their lives. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of cases where you talk with former players, so many former players at this point, they're 30, they're 40, they're 50, and they're feeling the effects of those injuries that went poorly treated, which I guess leads to my last question here, and then we can wrap things up. Is what you and I are describing here a college football problem or a college athletics problem? Or is it that, but you were in a uniquely bad situation with a uniquely bad coach? Like, do you feel qualified to sort of opine about that? Like, in terms, obviously you're an advisor to the Players Association. Now we're going to be trying to remedy these issues together as we head forward into a future that, God willing, will include collective bargaining that can address, these issues. But to what extent is this a college football problem versus, you were under a particularly bad coach? What do you think?
So it's a national problem. And I have friends in sports medicine community who talk to me about it, but don't want to come forward because it's difficult. You get bad press. You get people saying bad things about you.
Yeah.
And it's, harder. It makes it harder to do your job in some ways because pressure's around you. It's definitely a national problem. And it's not just college football. Football and basketball are the worst because of the amount of money involved. It's uniquely more college than professional because professionals all have agents and they have a union to represent them that can come in and help them. Now, as we've seen in the NFL, even, it's not perfect.
Yep.
Still some issues, but it's better. It's way better in NFL than it is in college.
Yeah.
There's some change now because of the NIL stuff. It's helping some of the kids, but it's only helping the kids who are the highest level athletes. It's not helping the backup center who's not getting an NIL deal and still doesn't have anybody there protecting him, especially if I, as a medical staff, don't stand up to the coach.
Yep.
And lots of the physicians give in. I feel bad disparaging some of my own colleagues, but that's the reality of it. Every major doping scandal in the world has been physician organized. So physicians are people.
Yep.
Good, bad, and otherwise.
Let's end on a higher note. I agree with that. It's this interplay between individuals and institutions. We know individuals have these different impulses towards different things, good and bad. And they can't always, not in positions where they feel like they can control those. So we need to create healthier institutions. I think the schools, the athletic departments are just very unhealthy right now, but in part because of that profit motive that you keep coming back to, right? The money, the pressure to make more money and to continue to have the seats in Beaver Stadium packed, right? And have those media rights contracts rolling in. And that's why I think, we need a new institution. And that's why I founded this institution. And, because I just don't, tell me if you agree with. I just don't think meaningful reform can ever come from the inside. I think these athletic departments, there's no way they're going to self-reform. Like, the fact that the NCAA could just ignore your case and the Big Ten could just ignore your case as if it doesn't even exist or it doesn't even matter. But God forbid people are stealing signs a little bit too much. It just shows where their priorities are. Does it not?
Well, if you think about it this way, unless you have a extremely strong moral compass, the pressures for you to lose a $10 million job are extraordinary. So you can kind of see why that happens, right? It's the amount of money is just tremendous. And you may, whether this is true or not, but the perception is that you're at a competitive disadvantage by not putting kids out there who are injured, and you're going to lose and then lose your job. So you can see why it happens. It's not rocket science. So somebody needs to come in to put better, bumpers on there to make it better. And I'm not under any illusion that it's going to totally fix the problem.
Yeah.
But we can do way better.
Way better. Yes. That's an excellent place to end. We can do way better. God willing, this partnership here and the team we're putting together here heading into the new year can be a part of that in the next, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So let's end there. Dr. Lynch, this is our guest today. Once again, I'm Jason Stahl, founder and executive director of the College Football Players Association. Our guest today is Dr. Scott Lynch. Dr. Lynch, I just want to personally just thank you for all that you've done on behalf of college athletes and the risks you've taken in telling your story and taking it to trial and so on. And, can't wait to do good work with you heading into the future.
I appreciate that. I always have fun with our conversations. And I just want to add one other thing. Everyone, as you just sort of did, congratulates me. I always say it's not a win for me. It's a win for college athletes.
That's right. And I hope we can carry that win here into the future.
I'm a quiet person. I don't like the focus being on me. But unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
You've taken it up. I love it. All right. You take care, and we'll see everyone here on our next podcast. I have a couple player interviews talking about some of the issues that Dr. Lynch has illuminated here regarding the lack of independent medical care for college football players. Take care.